We're recording this time, James.
Well, we weren't allowed to use it. Are you already on?
Okay, we just had some roast duck.
All right, okay.
So background is we've just recorded the entire interview, but I didn't hit the record button.
That red light's giveaway.
We're going to do the magic again.
All right.
I'll just give some context to this. Hold on.
Take 2.
Okay.
We were a small organisation. We used to screen 4 members once a month at the theatre.
Twice a month?
Twice a month at the
Yes.
theatre at the museum.
Our members were big contributors. They made a trolley, a handmade trolley that they had with coffee and tea and biscuits, and they'd wheel it out the front of the museum theaterette, and everyone would stand around having tea and biscuits and talking about films afterwards.
Before we set up the deck chair, we were saying this is what in other places is done by a different organisation. It's not done by film societies, but there was no other organisation in Darwin at the time. So we said, well, let's do it. It was very exciting, but also a little bit, I don't think stressful, but we were also, I wonder how it's going to go. We didn't really know it would work.
And they didn't know what to call it, so they put a call out for names. So I brainstormed out a list of, 20 names. I can't remember the list, but one of the favourite ones I really quite liked was Charles's Lush, which is a terrible name for cinema. And then, ta-da, opening of the cinema, it's now called the Deckchair Cinema. I'm like, oh, well, that's a pretty good name.
The old site had quite a different feel to this current site because it was smaller, it was a little bit more out of the way, it was sort of harder to find, and if you were down there, it felt very intimate. It just felt like it was like a little magical diamond that you'd just discover once you got there.
The biggest item was getting the deck chairs made.
It's uncomfortable. The deck chairs have not changed in 30 years. Like, what the heck?
And I know a lot of people aren't happy about the deck chairs. They don't like them. They don't find them comfortable. But I'm quite sure there are more people who prefer the deck chairs than who don't prefer them.
I was the projectionist at the Deckchair Cinema from year 2000 until about 2014. In those days, the films were 35mm screenings, sometimes 16mm. But the 35mm screenings were the sort of, you could call it tedious, I guess. All the reels came separately. There was sometimes 8, 9, 10 reels per film. They all had to be put together and spliced together in the right order. You had to make sure that every time you joined something together, it was done with a double splice, otherwise it could fall apart as it was going through the projector. You had to make sure that the frames lined up and none of the sprockets were cut loose, otherwise you'd end up with a framing issue as the next reel came through. And, occasionally someone would knock on the door and say, excuse me, we can't see what's going on because the frames come halfway down the screen, and so you'd just change the racking on the projector. Occasionally you'd get fog on the glass and you'd not realise because the air conditioning inside the projection box is quite cold. And so someone would again knock on the door and say, oh, you've got fog on the window. Very occasionally there'd be a problem. The sprocket would be broken or the splice wasn't quite done correctly, and it would actually just fall apart as it came through the projector. And you would just immediately have to go and press the stop button, make an announcement to the audience and just say you've got a technical issue. There'll be a few minutes break, you turn the lights up, and you'd just spend like heaps of time just trying to get everything back in order. Sometimes you'd have to cut the film and just leave a big scrap of film on the floor, join back together what you could, run it to the end and fix it up afterwards. It could have been a disaster as well if you'd lost a heap of film. Yeah.
James and Domi, I think their names were, in about, when was that? The late 90s.
There was a stormy night and there was a boat being taken around the world, possibly by a French couple, and it was wrecked at the bottom of the rocks below the deck chair, because the deck chair was up on a cliff then. So they came to us and said, our boat's wrecked, we need to haul it up. Can we put it up near the deck chair? We said, yeah, no worries. And so they stayed there for the last couple of months of the season while their boat was being repaired, and we had a big sign on the side of the boat advertising the deck chair. So everybody was happy about that in the end. Yeah.
And they lived down at the site and kind of looked after the shipping containers and the site, and kind of helped out with the management of the deck chair.
Yeah. It was lucky for both
Very
of us.
Darwin thing.
Yes. I remember when closing film was We of the Never Never, which we had a lot of trouble getting access to. But because we were showing We of the Never Never, we had people coming from Katherine, people who had been involved in the film. And I can remember this Indigenous man, sort of bow-legged man, saying, I rode a horse in that picture and that's me there, So it was kind of really lovely to kind of see that this film, which it was hard to get access to, but it really brought a lot of people that we'd never seen before. And somehow the message had got out that we were going to be showing it. So that was a really lovely night for me.
I remember watching a 6-hour French film that was on multiple reels. I can't remember the name of it, but the thing was that the filmmaker decided to cut everyone's heads off and everyone's feet. And it was great to see. I don't know that I'd be able to sit through it again now, but it was funny because not only did the filmmaker cut the heads and the feet off of people, but every shot was kind of, they'd set up, a jousting competition with horses and a whole big crowd, but they'd only ever film like through people's feet, where you catch a glimpse of some horses riding by. So you got a sense that there's all this stuff going on, and they spent the budget on this big film, but we only watching this tiny little window of it. That was funny. I don't remember what it was called.
Watching The Castle about 3 times over my 8 years. That's very memorable.
End of 2000, we weren't going to come here. We were going to go to a part of the amphitheatre. There were some oil tanks here, and they were having discussions about moving them out. And so we'd come down and we'd talked to him, and we'd walked around, not this actual part, it was further down towards Jervois Park. And he was he didn't knock us back, he was encouraging, but there was never any follow through from him. So we'd already thought this would be a lovely site, but nothing really came until Claire Martin was...
Yeah, and Don Parker.
I often think about it. Every time I come to the deck chair, I think it's kind of incredibly lucky that the deck chair is at this site. Help from Claire, the administrator, different people, but timing. The waterfront wasn't built. There was all this kind of industrial area that wasn't being used as much. The new Newport was underway, so they're winding down port operations here. And there's kind of like, oh yeah, we're not quite sure what we're going to do. Had the deck chair applied in this day and age to have a space like this, no way. I don't reckon there's no way that the deck chair would have been here. But just this window where, oh yeah, there's that weird old gas tank site. Let's give them that.
Of course, there's always going to be highlights working at the deck chair, many highlights indeed. But some of my favourite moments were about 2006, early in the year, would have been April screening. Michael Franti, his documentary was screened, and he was doing a bit of performance afterwards. And of course it rained. It just rained. And so the crowd just amassed around the kiosk. He was under the kiosk cover playing a few songs for us. It was just an amazing experience, just a very intimate experience there.
I had heard that Baz had been here in 2006 when we had a screening of Candy, an Australian film. I think it was in October, so, unlikely to be a good night necessarily. So he came in with his cap pulled down, but then it started raining. So we had to go back with everybody else and sit under the cover. And so, there's Baz. But he did make use of that experience when he made Australia, when he had the screening in the Broome Cinema, when the rain came down and everybody ran towards the back. So the deck chair played a role in the making of Australia. Of course, later on, when he had the rushes, they wanted to show, they used the deck chair, and the cast of Australia were here with their families, and yes, it was very exciting for us.
Did you meet Baz Luhrmann when he was here?
No. I did get to meet Charles Chauvel's grandson here.
Well, one favourite Deckchair memory was getting the okay from James and Alice when I got the job way back in the dim dark history. That was pretty memorable.
And I'm currently the possum rescuer here for sick possums at the deck chair.